So good evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to Krea Engage. This is the sixth webinar that we're doing under the series Krea Engage. I think, thanks to the public health situation that we have right now, all of us are at home, quarantined. I am part of the outreach. So typically we'd be going out across the country, meeting all of you, meeting students, parents, principals, but now because we have no other option, we are doing these webinars, and thankfully all our faculty members at Krea have been really helpful in coming forth and helping us with these webinars. So today we have, if I can take the liberty to say, one of the most popular faculty members at Krea, and I'm sure Ananya and Amartya would agree with me, Professor Prayaag Akbar. So I'm sure many of you. Sorry.
I just said hi.
I'm sure many of you. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have heard of
Confirm.
Prayaag already. Sorry.
I can confirm that fact that he is indeed one of the most popular professors at Krea.
Thank you, Amartya. So just to, I'm sure many of you have already heard, read about Prayaag. He's quite a celebrity already, but still to introduce him, Prayaag is a senior fellow in the Literature and Arts department for the Center of Writing and Pedagogy at Krea University. He's done his MSc from the London School of Economics. So Prayaag, of course, is an author of a critically acclaimed work of fiction called Leila. His novel, published early in 2017, won the Tata Lit Live First Book Award and has been shortlisted for International Book Fest First Book Award, the Hindu Prize for Best Fiction, and the Shaktibat Award. It has also been developed as a Netflix series. I don't know how many of you have been able to see it. It's on Netflix. You can see it. I've seen it. I mean, it's so gripping. I don't know how much Prayaag is happy or unhappy with the way it's adapted into a series. We'll ask him that. But it's a beautiful series that is available for all of you. Prayaag has worked as a journalist in a number of leading Indian publications. He was consulting editor with Mint, a leading Indian financial newspaper, and before that was the deputy editor of the news website Scroll, where he was an early member of the team. He completed his MSc in comparative politics at the London School of Economics, where his master's dissertation studied how local language media represented communal violence during the Gujarat riots of 2002. He has a BSc in economics with a major in political science from Dartmouth College. So that's about Prayaag. I'm sure Amartya and Ananya will be able to different different angle of Prayaag. So let me also welcome two of our first year students. We have with us Amartya, who you can see on the screen. Amartya, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you for that, Vikram. So I'm a first year student at Krea, and so Professor Prayaag was so the very first class at Krea for me was held by Professor Prayaag, which was the writing and oral communication course. So it's great, like it's been great interacting with him throughout this time, and he's been of great help. Like I have read his novel, and I think it's a pretty gripping tale, especially for the times we're living in right now. And we do live in a dystopia, I believe. So let's see how that turns out.
Thank you. So you're from Bihar, right? If I'm not wrong.
Right now, I'm located in Nalanda. Yes.
Nalanda. Okay, great. And then we also have Ananya. Ananya, can you introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Ananya. I'm a first year student from Bangalore. And like Amartya mentioned, Professor Prayaag was our first ever class in Krea was a writing and oral communications class, which was held by Professor Prayaag. And all of us was super nervous. But I think by far, one of the reasons like that course has stuck by all of us is it has taught us things that we have used in every course so far, like after that. So out of the 11 skill and core courses in our first year, we use the skills we learned there for practically every course. And yeah, I mean, during the course of this webinar, we'll get to know more about it, but it's been a great experience.
Thank you. So today the session is also, so the title of the session is about writing and creativity. So when I was discussing with Prayaag, we were thinking that what should we do, and Prayaag came up with this session. So I would hand over now to Professor Prayaag, to the man of the hour. Please take it ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vikram. Thank you guys, Amartya, Ananya. I didn't have to bribe anyone for that introduction, but it does seem like it. But really, thank you. It was very effusive, and it's very heartwarming to hear all of that. I actually wanted to do this session when Vikram had contacted me. I wanted to do this session for all of you, for the prospective students or parents, whoever's logging in. But I really wanted to, I guess it would have been easy for me to talk, but I really wanted to bring some students on board. And I'm very grateful that Ananya and Amartya made the time to come out and talk to you guys today because, first of all, they were outstanding students, but beyond that, they were, I think it would be really good for you guys to understand, to get a sense of how we teach, what we're trying to do at Krea, which is hopefully trying to do something unusual and interesting and new. And who better than the students? I can go on about it, but who better than the students to really let you guys get a sense of that? So, let's, without too much further introduction, let me start on what we're talking about today. So, the title of this webinar, and thank you, first of all, thank you all for joining us. I know it's difficult wherever you are. Everyone is going through quarantine.
And Prayaag, we have a record number of people. We have more than 260 students, parents, teachers have joined from around the world. Wonderful. So this is a high number.
Not that it's a competition, but no. So the title of this webinar that we gave was Writing and Creativity. And it is, it's something that it's difficult to, even to teach any of the essential elements of writing in a webinar like this is almost impossible. So I thought I would try and explain or try and demonstrate how writing and creativity are both kind of essential pillars in how we think. They help us think better. They help us, plan our future better. Actually, if you can think about something clearly, you can write about it clearly. That's something I firmly believe in. And yeah, so I think we can take it a little. So I was thinking about this, and I'm sorry, it's still so strange to try and do a talk like this over this platform. I don't know which week of lockdown this is. And I've done a few of these for, LitFest have been doing this, but it still feels strange to me because, when you're talking to an audience, you can tell if they're old or they're young or if they're interested, if they're bored out of their minds, if they're planning to throw things on the stage, you can tell. But here I have no idea. So I'm just going to assume that you guys are all deeply interested and really enjoying my spiel. So that's the only feedback I have. All I can see is Vikram's face smiling, and he's smiling very well. Yeah. Anyway,
maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what brought you to this. Yes,
I will. I'll get to it. So, I thought, again, to just quickly introduce myself. My name is Prayaag Akbar. I'm a novelist. I wrote Leila, which came out a couple of years ago, and was received fairly well. Now I'm working on my second novel, and I also teach writing at Krea. I'm going to be teaching creative writing, which I think is a very important discipline. It's not very usual for universities to offer creative writing at the undergraduate level. Certainly not when I was in college. It's a very new thing. It's still experimental at this level, but I do think it's a very essential discipline, and it's a way useful, as Ananya said, in almost any discipline, in almost any way. It teaches you originality, it teaches you creativity, it teaches you how to look at situations in an unusual way. But before we get into all of that, I did want to say that this is not a lecture. This is more, I'll present some introductory thoughts. I'll talk a little bit about my work, about writing, about Krea, and then I actually want to keep it very specifically a question and answer session. So that's why I brought Ananya and Amartya on board, because I think it would work much better as a discussion as rather than me giving a lecture for an hour or so. So Ananya and Amartya have already introduced myself, so I don't need to do that again. Already introduced themselves. So when Vikram had contacted me about this session, he was like, "What would you want to talk about?" And I was thinking about it, and then I don't know if it was he who suggested it or it was me, but I think we arrived at this conclusion. Why should we study? We arrived at this question. Why should we study writing in this world that's changing so rapidly? It's changing so fast, and it's actually a very good question. It's a very pertinent question. What is the use of when right now the world needs doctors, it needs nurses, it needs farmers and sanitation workers, it needs people out there doing very, very essential things, doing very important things, saving lives. And what use is a writer sitting at his desk in some forgotten part of the country, some corner of the country? What good can a writer do? What good is studying writing at a time like this when it seems like the world is actually either spinning out of control or falling apart? And so I began thinking about this more and more. And I think one thing that writing does help, the simplest answer perhaps to that question is that writing helps us make sense of all this massive change that's going on around us, especially when the world really seems chaotic and unwieldy. Writing helps us to draw some sense out of it. The world, I know you guys you're all very young, you're in school or perhaps just in college, and this is a very young age to be experiencing something like this. Believe me, like you can go up to generations above me and people have never experienced anything like this. So you guys are going through something that's very difficult and traumatic, but you're all dealing with it in your own ways, I know. And when we write, we try and draw some sense out of that chaos. The world is actually, even in non-COVID times and non-pandemic times, the world is very chaotic. There's a lot going on all the time that seems, there's a lot of cruelty, there's a lot of viciousness, there's a lot of sadness. It doesn't have to be intentional. There's just a lot of sadness. And when we write, when we experience those things, it sometimes feels like the world is unfair to us, or the world is dumping all these burdens on us. And when we write, we actually draw some sense out of that chaos. When you write, you have to draw a narrative. You draw a linear narrative out of all of these things that are going on around you. And and that helps us actually to fashion some kind of truth. You have to create a truth. And of course, it's not to say that we don't, when we write, of course, we want other people to read us. Of course, every writer writes so that they're read by other people. But before that, it's so that the writer themselves can feel that I have drawn some sense out of this world. I have made a story out of all of this chaos that's going on around me. I have drawn something out of this world. And I think one of the best examples of this is a writer who lived hundreds of years ago. And I know Amartya and I have talked about this writer before. She's a great British writer called Mary Shelley, who you might be familiar with. She wrote a book called Frankenstein, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. She also wrote a novel called The Last Man. Now, she was a woman. She lived in Europe in the 1800s, somewhere in the 19th century. And she lost her husband, the poet Percy Shelley. She lost 3 children to something like this. There was a pandemic raging, bubonic plague raging through Europe, and I think in successive years she lost 3 people very, very close to her, and that pandemic was going on for decades. Did she? Oh, the world is so chaotic. The world is so unfair. I don't believe in. It's been so cruel to me that I can't respond. Her response was that she wrote. She sat down at a desk and wrote about a world that was falling apart. She wrote about a world destroyed by disease. She wrote about a world where every person actually dies. I mean, it's considered one of the first dystopic novels. She wrote about a world where everyone actually died, and apart from one man, that's why it's called The Last Man. And she wrote about a world where all of these great facets of European civilization, all their learning and all their knowledge and this beautiful architecture that they built all over the world, all of that sort of suddenly falls apart. And I'm sorry, am I still going through? Okay, great. I just lost some video, so are we good? Ananya? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, and she wrote, and so her response, and so even through all of that horrible traumatic experience that she went through, she managed to find a way to continue writing, to make sense, because she needed to make sense of the world. And now, 300 years later, almost, the world, all of us in this world are going through this quite a similar experience. We're going through an experience that is actually quite similar to what she went through, and people are reading her novel again. And I think there is some real beauty in that, in the fact that her work that was written 200 years ago or 250 years ago is still relevant today. And if she hadn't written about that moment, people today would not be able to identify with that moment. People today would not be able to see the commonality in the human experience. What does fiction do? Fiction teaches us that we're not alone. That fiction teaches us that even our our weirdest thoughts are not actually ours alone, but there's a continuity with all of human beings. And I think that was one of the things that really stayed with me, is that if someone's book can be read 250 years down later and still people find it urgent and relevant, that is really a testament to the importance of writing, the beauty of literature, the power of literature. And well, that's one answer to why I think we should keep writing, even through chaos, even through very, very difficult times. So with that said, with this idea that, writing is essential at these times, do we only need to study writing in times of chaos? Is that the conclusion that we're left with? And a lot of people ask me why I chose writing. And it's a very basic thing. To writing is about something that I've always done and I've always felt was very natural. But it's not only me. We all do it. We all do it at all times. Human beings are we're myth makers. We create stories all the time. We create stories out of our experiences of the day. If someone asks you how was your day, you don't tell them list by list. You don't tell them first I went to the market, then I went to then I went here, and then I went to the chemist, and then I came home, and then I did yoga. That would be a very boring way. You choose the highlights. You choose interesting things that happened in your day. Oh, I saw a snake here. I did this. Something like that. You choose the most interesting things of your day, and you write, and you create a narrative out of those incidents. And that is actually what all human beings do at all times. There's a great, it's actually one of the things that actually, people always ask what separates us from the animals. And there's a Israeli historian called Yuval Noah Harari. I'm sure some of you might have encountered his work. He's quite famous now. And, his theory, he wrote that at a very basic level, the only thing that actually differentiates us from animals is this myth making, is this ability to tell stories, to create stories, because animals behave, they behave violent, they get hungry, they behave almost, they can be loving, they can do almost everything, that they can display almost every emotion and every action that human beings can at its most basic level. But the one thing they can't do is make up stories. You'll never hear of animals making up stories. And Yuval Harari identifies this as a kind of engine of civilization. He says that if we didn't have stories, we wouldn't be able to collectivize. We wouldn't be able to come together as groups of people. If we didn't believe in, say, the first tribes that came together believed in things like a thunder god or a sun god, or or a totem, like some kind of religious figure. Then later years, civilizations started being built upon ideas of kings. Other people became, cities started developing around the ideas of around ideas of democracy, around ideas of, if we didn't have this ability to tell stories about ourselves, about the world around us, we wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to gather together. We wouldn't be able to collectivize. We would all be warring and fighting. This is Harari's theory. And we wouldn't be the very advanced civilization that we are today. Without, for him, it's really, I found it very interesting as a writer, because at a very basic level, that is what separates us from animals, and that is what actually is, that is what has led us to this point, what has made us as developed as we are today. I did want to talk. I think we have some time, right? Okay, great. I did want to talk a little bit quite quickly about writing at Krea, because it's very important. It's a discipline we've taken very seriously at Krea. Actually, one of the things that drew me to Krea University was when I first met the Vice Chancellor. I met a couple of members of the Academic Council, and everyone was so keen on treating writing as a very essential part of every student's toolkit. Writing is pretty much essential for all liberal arts students. If you want to be a liberal arts student, you should be able to write fairly decently. But at Krea, I think there's a special focus on it. We teach a course which Ananya and Amartya and I will be talking about soon. We teach a course called Writing and Oral Communication, where we study academic writing. I'm going to be teaching creative writing soon. These are ways. It's not only that we're training you to become a writer or to be able to write an academic essay. We're hoping to use the skills in these classes to actually teach you to be able to teach skills that actually are transferable to almost any discipline. And that is the way we approach the teaching of writing at Krea, and that's the way that's what we hope that any student gets out of it. So without going on too much further, I just thought I'd bring in Amartya and Ananya now. Can you guys hear me? Amartya and Ananya were both my students. I taught them in their first term at Krea. And it was actually a very exciting time. It was exciting for them. It was exciting for us. It was our first term as faculty together. It was their first term as college students. And I remember telling them in the first class, we're all taking this bold new step together. And, it felt unprecedented at the time. And then now cut to 1 year later, it's unprecedented around us. It just goes to show. But, one of the things that really stayed with me about that class, it was a very small section. We had 14 students, it was a tight group, we worked together. But, there were students from all over the country. People had different abilities, different proficiency in English. Some people had not hardly had exposure to English at all before they came to university, and very bright kids, but just hadn't studied in an English medium school. And, and one of the things we really try to encourage as a group, as a faculty, is amongst the students, is the ability to work together. This is not just, we do a lot of group work at Krea because we feel it's important even after your academic career. It's important for your academic career, certainly, but even after your academic career. And both Ananya and Amartya were, they were excellent students, very vocal, hardworking, very bright. But they both, what I really admired about them was that they were both able to work very well with the rest of the class and bring a lot of people up to their level, help people who might have been struggling more. And I think that really captured something of the Krea ethos. That's the ethos we want the students to have, that we want to instill as a faculty. And that's why I thought we should all, we could all talk together about what this course was like. So now I think I've embarrassed you guys sufficiently. So Ananya, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, could you tell everyone a little bit about the WOC course, about writing and oral communication?
Well, so thank you for that. But no, so the WOC course was, like Sir mentioned, we came in, and a lot of us, we came in from different backgrounds. So our comfort, our proficiency with writing, not just academic writing, but any writing for that matter, was very different. And academic writing was something most of us weren't familiar with. So we really did not know. Like, I remember our first paper, the whole class did so badly. And we were all like, just like, because we had no idea how to go about with it. And that's the thing. So slowly, like we did a course of 5 different papers, and with every paper you could really see every student's kind of the ability to write and think improve. And that was one of the best parts about the course, which was that it really in the beginning, like if we read some of our papers now, more than questioning our language, we'll be questioning our thinking. We'll be like, why were we thinking that way? Why is our thinking so kind of cluttered and so illogical, and there's just not a proper thought process to it. We think there is, but there really isn't. And I think by the end of the course, like if you saw a lot of our papers, we just had like, I think just the flow of the paper was something that everyone had. And the ability to, like, so one interesting thing that we always did in class was this thing called peer review. So again, that comes under the whole thing of collaboration and stuff, but we used to always read each other's papers and give each other feedback and then work on it. And I think just practices like that, because you got so many different viewpoints on every piece you wrote, that by the end, the piece that you actually produced and which was your final draft was so kind of rounded, and it had such kind of clarity to it, that like I think we were all really proud of what we produced by the end.
Yeah, it should be. The papers really improved. And I'm sorry to embarrass you, Ananya, but I remember, Ananya, I think you must, she was obviously one of the students who was used to doing very well in school. And I remember when I gave her first grade on a paper, when she came to my office after the class, and she was just, I think she was in shock. She probably never got a grade like that in her life. But I think we weren't out to shock anyone or fail anyone or anything like that, though the grades weren't great. It was more about, the jump from high school writing to college writing is actually vast. It's probably one of the biggest gulfs that anyone has to cross. Everyone goes through this. I remember telling them all about my own experience in college. My first year, it was horrifying. I thought, oh, good writer. I just had these ideas, and then you go into class and you go into college and you realize, my God, I don't know anything. So it is a big gulf. And the WOC course is part of teaching how to bridge that gulf, but also teaching you about how to, honestly, it really is about how to structure your thoughts, how to structure an argument. First of all, what we teach is how to build an argument. So if you want to argue a point, if say you want to write a history essay, I need you to be able to find the evidence amongst the sources, find out that argument, and bring it to the table. And then present it in a way that I can understand as a reader. So that is, I think, one of the really essential things. And Amartya, can I put you into this now? I just wanted to ask you, did you feel there were things in your WOC course that, skills that were transferable to other? I know you have a lot of other academic interests, things that were transferable to other courses yet in your other courses that you've taken in college?
So I think WOC forms the backbone of all of the writing intensive courses we have. So I think in trimester 2, we had exploring the social and historical, or the ESH course as we called it, and the philosophy, exploring the philosophical perspective course. So both of them were writing heavy. And this trimester we have got ethics course, which is again writing. I mean, this trimester most of the courses have become writing heavy due to the necessities and this whole situation we are in. But I think that it was a very crucial part, and still is a very crucial part, like how to format your paper and expressing your thoughts in the specific format, like having a proper intro, having that introduction sentence, introducing your sources, and all that has really helped. But the most I really can course for getting me into writing poetry and prose. Like Professor Prayaag and Ananya have helped me through that. So I've started writing fiction. So that's one thing which I've taken from this course.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I knew you started writing poetry. That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. Okay. Why don't you guys ask, you guys had some questions, right? Amartya, Ananya? For me? No?
Sure. So I'll go ahead. So I have one. So this question always bugs me, and I ask this to every writer I meet, including the professors. So in W class, you gave us a lot of flexibility with deadlines, and I still submitted late, of course. And that instilled in us a bit of a sense of discipline, right? So we actually used to feel like, oh, so the deadline is midnight, let's start. We have to start right now. Like we all start panicking in groups. But how important is discipline for creative writing? So do you believe deadlines for creative writing, or do you just wait for the creativity to strike and then just start writing like in a force of passion or something?
See, the thing is, if you wait for creativity to strike, you'll never write a book, because there's no like thunderbolt, there's no lightning strike or anything like that comes in. You have to be very disciplined when writing a book, because there's actually no one to give you a deadline. You have you have your own work. The only person expecting it is your agent and your publisher. And if you want to take an extra year over your book, no one is going to stop you. It's just that you might not eat that year. You might not have any money for food. But you have to, so you have to actually instill that discipline. And actually, when I used to work at a job, when I worked in journalism and things like that, I used to wake up much later, and I used to get to work late and things like that because and now I find I start work very early in the morning every day, and I'm much more disciplined. I think because I had to teach myself that discipline, because there's really no one outside. There's no external discipline for you. So if you don't impose that discipline upon yourself, the work just won't get done. So I think creative writing especially fiction demands a lot of discipline, but it has to be an internal discipline. Ananya?
So my question was, in the WOC course, we read so much. We consumed so many different types of medias. We read articles, academic papers, podcasts, videos, everything. And before this, we kind of spoke about how writing helps us think and structure our thoughts. But also, if you could highlight how writing helps us consume that media, how writing helps us perceive, and what kind of clarity it gives us there.
That's a lovely question. I think what writing. See, you can't write if you don't read. If you can't write well. Certainly, you could. I mean, there are writers. I don't want to name names, but there are writers who clearly don't read. But you have to be able to read. You have to be able to read. You have to read extensively. You have to read the best writers you can get your hands on, and read as much as possible. And the more you read, the more the better your eye becomes, the better your sense of what is true and what is not becomes. I think that's one of the main problems with fake news. When you see the people complaining about that, like the people in America complaining about the lockdown and being like, oh no, you can tell that I read this article and they're saying that COVID is fake and things like that. You can tell those people have read one article in their lives, or like 5 articles, and they've read one article about, like, okay, this is I need. It's confirming my own bias. I have a bias about this thing. It's confirming my bias, and that's all I need to know. And break the lockdown or whatever. I won't read all this scientific advice. And we actually studied a paper about this. I don't know if you remember the Will Davies paper, which I'm actually so glad now that we read in class together, because that paper was about this moment in a sense. We destroyed all this. We stopped elevating expertise. We stopped thinking that experts know everything. All these politicians who've come to power, Trump, Bolsonaro, whoever else, they basically, they've derided experts. They've derided knowledge. They've said that, experts don't know anything. We know everything. And because of that, now we've reached a moment where we have a direct health crisis. We have a global health crisis, and people still don't want to believe scientists. People still don't want to believe doctors. And, that should be frightening to everyone. So that is actually the difference. When you read a lot, more than writing, I think, when you read a lot, you can tell the difference between, a piece of information that's clearly fabricated and something that's supported by evidence and supported by the right evidence. So I think that really is the key element. And I think even if you're, with WOC or with creative writing, whoever takes a course like that, you should emerge with those tools. Have we lost Amartya? I think we have time for another question, Ananya, if you have another one, or we can move on.
Yeah, sure. So another question was, in this answer itself, you spoke about the importance of reading. But again, for like one thing we did do in the WOC course was to write well. We had to kind of perceive this kind of interconnected, very wholesome nature of every situation. So apart from reading, what would you advise any writer or any, aspiring creative or any kind of writer to go about with getting their information, getting their content in terms of other kinds of media, or how should they go about it if reading is not the only way to go?
Well, I mean, reading is only part of it. How do you acquire research in your life? A lot of people, and I hate telling this to students of your age because, you guys are still young, but like a lot of people say that, the novel you write in your 20s is garbage because you haven't actually lived enough of life to understand to understand what writing fiction is. And I don't know if that's true. There are people who write great novels at a young age. But what's true is that, you do need a certain amount of lived experience, and you do need, to understand certain things about how the world works, to understand certain things about sadness, to understand certain things about happiness, before you're able to transfer that to a creative work. Creative work should be sound emotionally. It should have it should have your emotional trajectories and your narrative trajectories. And I do think that it's important. I mean, I really don't want to discourage anyone. That's not the intention at all. But it's just that there is the reading is important, the lived experience is important, and most writers will do tons of research, like crazy amounts of research. When I was writing Leila, I was reading so much anthropology, because I was interested in how our cities are being fragmented, about how caste is dividing cities, how class is dividing cities. And the social anthropologists have been writing about this very beautiful, lovely essays. Important essays they've been writing about this for the last 10, 12 years. So when I was able to, read some of that academia and then bring it into my work, obviously you have to figure out, you can't actually you can't quote an academic paper, or you can't you have to understand how to use those ideas and work it into the story you want to tell. But that's the process that's actually what writing is. It's about how you transfer ideas and research and all of that into a story about a person. That's what fiction is. Okay. Vikram? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Prayaag and Ananya and Amartya. I think it was a fantastic talk. Prayaag, I think hundreds of students now want to get into your brain and understand your process of thinking. They want to know everything about how you go ahead with different things. And we've got so many questions. We've got registrations from more than 10 countries, about 40 cities in India. And what we've been able to do is shortlist some of those very, very interesting questions that puts you in a spot. And we are letting those students ask you those questions. So can we start with Leila? Can we start with you? So Leila, so everybody who's asking a question, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, which school, which city, and go ahead and ask a question.
Hi, my name is Leila Ripali. I'm living in Mumbai, but I study in Pune, and I'm in 12th grade. And I am actually writing a mini thesis on Prayaag Akbar's book. It's called the extended essay as a part of the IB. And so I had a question to Mr. Akbar. So you spoke about, someone earlier spoke about how we're currently living in dystopia, and you spoke about all the reading that you've done and all the research that you've done. So to what extent is your novel based off on the current political scenario, and what is your opinion on the current political situation in India?
I've been asked this question since my novel came out. I'm not, I think certainly people keep asking me are we living in a dystopia? Are we, various questions like this. I actually started writing the novel in, many years before, this government came to power, all of that. And I think what I was trying to write about was actually a lot of the horrible class divisions that you see in India, how we are able to kind of cut ourselves off from the really horrible ways that our cities are shaping up. You said you live in Bombay, or you're from Bombay. I used to live in Bombay, and I lived there for a lot of the novel I actually wrote in Bombay. And, it's a city where the class disparities are very, very stark. And I would be walking through the city, and, you see people sleeping under bridges, you see people sleeping, it's constant, it's unrelenting, actually, the kind of exposure that, the kind of sadness that you see. And, I began wondering, what is it about, why is this not a dystopia to this person? Why is this person not already living in a dystopia? This was 2014 or 2015. And I began thinking about what is non-dystopic about the world for this fella, for this gentleman. And once I understood that idea about how our cities are, in Leila, you've obviously read the book, and Leila, there are these, for Shalini, she's actually suddenly blocked off from the whole city. She can only use the thoroughfares, she can only use the main roads. And that's actually what it's like for many people who live in, for a new migrant to Delhi or Bombay. In Delhi, where I'm from, the city I grew up in, we have these residential colonies, and they put up big gates and they put up walls, and people aren't allowed in. People who don't look right aren't allowed in. And so, I began to think maybe our cities are already dystopic. And now I think what this pandemic is showing is that it's really thrusted into everyone's face. Everyone has to see how we've actually lived all these years, and what we've done over the years has actually led us to the situation where even governments, I'm not sure about the Modi government's response to all we've been going through, but I have my big doubts about it. But I do think that in some ways it was because we've been living like this for so many decades that there was no solution. You have to call it lockdown, but what do you do about the migrants? It's just very, very difficult. Of course, it could have been handled much better, but I think that we've already been living in a very, very fractured society for many years.
Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you, Prayaag, and thank you, Leila, for that question. Can we get Ms. Sandhya?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
I can.
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Hi.
Okay, hi. So I'm actually a parent of a current, and I work in online publishing. So I have two questions to ask. One is a little academic in nature, the question. So I believe that when you say a study of writing as it is taught to students, I believe actual writing should come from within. So what you really study is how to, honing the skill of the craft rather than writing itself. Am I right? What do you have to say about that?
I lost you for a second there, but I think were you saying that were you asking about whether writing should come from within and shouldn't be sort of implanted from the outside? Is that what you asked?
So what I'm saying is that true writing, when you consider writing as a writer, not just writing for the sake of recording things, should come. I believe it should come from inside. Your own thoughts, your own experiences, as you very rightly said, the lived experience. So what students is the craft of writing, not writing itself, right? That's what I want to ask.
I mean, of course, of course, it's all about craft. It's all about, you can't actually, you're totally right, 100% right, Sandhya. It's something that we can't teach someone how to write. There would be very many people who will come into the course at different levels of ability, but the idea is not, it's to help them, it's to assist, it's to make them see what works, what doesn't, what good writing is. In some ways, it's to understand the distinction between good writing and bad writing. To learn how to be true to yourself. A lot of writers, as you said, when you want to write from within, but it's very hard sometimes to access what's inside you, to access your deepest thoughts and to your most urgent thoughts. And the best writing, the most honest writing is always honest writing. It doesn't have to be real in the sense that it doesn't have to be this is what's happened in my life, but it has to draw from something real inside you. And that's so, in a creative writing course, that's one of the things you actually try and work with the student in, is to be able to find those stories that they want to tell. There's a reason that they would come and sit in my class, because they want to tell the story very badly, very urgently. They feel they have something to write, as opposed to sitting in a computer science class. And so it's my job as an instructor then to be able to help them find that, to help them find that ability in themselves and to be able to access that part of themselves and then be able to transmit it and to be able to get it out into the world.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had when I registered. That's more to your
Ma'am, we're losing you. We couldn't hear that question.
Something, it was about publishing, I know.
Yes, yes.
so
Maybe you can type it out.
easy.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Maybe you could type it out. I can hear you.
That question out. We'll take it from the chat.
Sure, I'll do that. Maybe you could answer it later because I'll type it out and send it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, can we now go to Arshia? Arshia Vora, can you please unmute yourself, put your video cam on and ask a question?
Sorry, just a second. Yeah, sorry. Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So my question was, when you're writing your characters, do they have to be based or slightly related to you, or is it okay if they're nothing like you or not even slightly related to you?
Or is it okay if, sorry?
Or is it okay if they're nothing like you? How do you make characters?
You should, I mean, see, the thing is that even characters who are nothing like you end up having some bits of you, you know, almost everyone. Every character, even villains and, you know, horrible people in your novel will carry some, because these are characters out of your imagination, you know, and you can only write about what you know. When my novel, it's, you know, I started writing it when I was 28, and I was writing about a 43-year-old woman. You know, it was kind of a very different, you know, and a woman who I didn't have a child at the time. Now I have a son, but at that time I didn't have a child, and I was writing about someone with a daughter. And you know, what could I do? I really wanted to tell the story, but I didn't know anything about that. You know, what it felt like to be a mother, to be anything. So I ended up putting little bits of myself into that character. You know, because I think on some levels, men and women aren't, you know, the men and women, of course, very different, but on other levels, we have the same way of experiencing the world and encountering the world. And you can always find, you know, your characters might not seem like you, they might not look like you, they might not talk like you, but there will be little bits of yourself in them if you're writing honestly, if you're writing well. And hopefully, you know, if you're writing now, that's great. Like that.
Thank you, Arshia. Thank you so much. So Arshia is from Bombay Scottish in Mahim. Yes, thank you. Can we now have Dewey? Introduce yourself and ask
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi.
Yes.
My name is Juhi, and I'm from Aditya Birla World Academy in Mumbai. So my question actually is that I'm a budding writer, and from time to time, I tend to feel a little insecure about like my writing in terms of is it good enough to share for publishing or to share with the world? So according to you, what's the best course of action to like overcome these kind of insecurities as such?
How about if you figure it out, can you tell me? Because this is not never ending. It's just a part of life. It's part of being a writer. You know, it's not an easy job. You have to go out and publish. You have to, you know, you have to face scrutiny. You have to face criticism. But it's a part of it. You know, I know. I was just actually reading something. You know, the American writer Philip Roth. He's, you know, I think he won the Nobel Prize. If I'm not, he definitely won the Pulitzer Prize. He might have won the Nobel Prize also. He's very acclaimed writer, you know, and at the end of his life, he's like, you know, I can't deal with all this, you know, I can't deal with the fact that this same paranoia you're talking about, you know, he's like, if every time before I publish something, I feel paranoid. And I'm working on my second novel right now, and and my first novel was received well, and it got some success and all of that. But every time I send something to my agent, I worry. I'm like, my God, um, I'm messed up, or I don't know what I'm doing. It's because writing is very difficult. It's not an easy job. It demands a lot from you. So, but it's very rewarding also. You feel wonderful if you get something right. It's the most wonderful job in the world. So, so you know, it's hard to say. I should try and learn more positive answers, or try and give you a more positive answer. But the truth is, it's just a part of it. This is a part of life, and you'll come to understand that it's actually what makes you better as a writer. That paranoia, that fear of criticism, that fear that that people will laugh or whatever, mock my work or whatever. The writers who don't have that fear at all, who are so confident at 22 or whatever, they're so confident that their work is brilliant. Those are the writers that you should almost never read. But the people who are actually who worry, those are the people who improve their work. So good luck with it, Julie.
Thank you.
It's a difficult process. It's a difficult process, but it's just part of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Yes, now we go to Prajay. Prajay, can you unmute yourself and ask a question?
One second. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay, so hi sir, I'm Prajay, I'm 15, and now that we've already established that even people in 20s don't have enough experience, it feels weird now. But I have to ask this one. So I've just started on an idea for a novel, and it's in the research phase basically. But I wanted to know about further away in the future, like what are publishing houses and editors looking for when they go through manuscripts and stuff? What exactly are they looking for?
Well, mostly they're looking for good writers. There's not a specific genre. There's not a specific most all publishing houses will publish from romance. They'll publish thrillers. They'll publish everything, and most be able to tell the difference between a good romance novel or a good a good thriller and a bad thriller and a bad romance novel. So I think you shouldn't worry so much about whether what publishing houses would want. I remember when I wrote my novel, no one was writing dystopic fiction in India at all. And I was told by someone, when I was working on it, I was told by someone, oh, no one reads that stuff in India. There's no market for it. Don't write it. And a few years later, Netflix wanted it. So you never know what's going to happen in your life. And I think you just stick to what you want to tell, the story you want to tell, because that's what will give your story the reality and authenticity. And that because that's your burning idea, right? That's the idea. If you're 15, you already have an idea for a novel and you want to write it. That's something to be proud of, and that's something to work on. And don't, because there's enough publishers, there's enough, there's, you can self-publish if no one wants it, but that's a far journey. I mean, that's a long journey. First, work on getting the idea right. Okay.
I also had one more
Thank
question,
you.
just one more. So I was recently developing my characters and stuff, and there's just one problem that I can't seem to get it real enough. So it just feels fake somehow, and I don't know how to get around that. Just...
I would say, read as much as you can. Read as much. What kind of stuff do you read? That's if you what genre is your book in? What idea? Like what?
I don't really know at this point. It's just something.
So whatever you're
just an idea.
Say you were writing about a magic boarding school, like a magician's boarding school or something. Then read Harry Potter. Read the best examples in that genre. The best writers, the best examples in that field, global, whatever, India, global, and read those guys because they've already done it. If you're writing a J.R.R. Martin kind of book, then Drive with Dragons and Swords and all of that, then read George R.R. Martin, read Tolkien. These guys have already done it. They've done it very well, and you can learn a lot. I mean, when I was writing, I read constantly because And what I would do is I would take a lot of notes. So almost all my novels have like notes all over them scribbled, like, because you can learn literally from every page of a novel if you try, from the best writers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prajay. We have 3 more questions on live, and then we have like a barrage of questions coming in the chat for you, Prayaag. So let's get into this. So next we have Arushi. Arushi, are you here? Arushi, can you unmute yourself? Yes.
Hi everyone. Can everyone see me? Yeah. I'm
Yes.
Arushi. I'm from RN Poda School in Mumbai. And actually I had 2 questions. I sort of figured out the third one. My first question was, how should I have 3 novels in the works, but I just don't seem to like get around to writing them. So what's the best way to go about, really writing a book? How should I do that?
The best way to go about writing a book would be, you have to sit at your desk every day and write. That's the only way, really. I wanted to write a novel maybe since I was your age, or maybe even before that, but I only published when I was 32, 33. No, sorry, I was 33, I think. So it takes time. You have to work at it, and it takes time to build yourself the discipline. I was working, when you get first you're in school, then you're in college, then then I started working at a job, and it's very hard to give yourself that time. Eventually, I had to, I just stopped doing anything apart from I would write all night, and then I would go to work in the morning because that's what you need to do. And then I had like enough, and basically it's all about discipline. It's about sitting at your desk, as as giving yourself 6 or 8 hours of at your desk, and then of your best self. Honestly, if you try and write when you're exhausted, after you're tired, all of that, it doesn't work as well as when you're writing fresh. When your mind is fresh, when your mind is powerful, when all the thoughts that are running through your mind all night are there. I love writing in the morning, and I know many writers do. So yeah, I know it's hard with your schedule now. You must be in school or college. I don't know, but it's try and make time. If you have 3 ideas in your summer vacations, sit down at your desk every day. This is like we're all locked in, so this is the perfect time, right? Yourself some time, and you'll see your work emerging. And do it incrementally. Write a few pages one day, a few pages one day, and then suddenly you'll see you have like 60 or 70 pages, and you won't even know where they came from. You'll be so excited to see that, and it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
Arushi, let me stop you there. Sorry. Can you put in your question in the chat box? The second one, we're just running out of time. We'll take it if time permits.
Yeah, sure.
Is that going to be okay? Yeah. Thank you. Can we now have Miss Azmin? Hello. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can. Hi.
Okay, hi. So I'm Azmeen. I'm a teacher at Bombay International School, and predominantly I teach English and drama. And I've faced this constant dilemma where every year when the batch comes to me, they are a lot more disinterested in writing than the previous batch. And I think that happens, I don't know, perhaps because their attention span is really, really short. My question to you here is, how do you, so, I try to take writing offline and online, sorry, and move from this paper pencil to, online collaborative writing. And it did help a marginal section turn interested in, slightly more interested. But there is always this group which is just disinterested in writing because not everyone wants to really be a writer at the end of it, right? And it's okay. How is it that I can motivate that little section as well? Who's so hesitant to even make a start and help them understand that actually writing could open up other aspects, right? Like just venting or sharing those things with themselves that they would not otherwise share. How do I inspire that little section who believes that they're not good writers because the others are prolific?
That's a really good question. I don't envy you your that's a task that I don't envy at all. I talk sometimes still to my high school teacher. I was in school in Delhi, and I'm still in touch sometimes with my English teacher. And I was actually one of the few. If you grew up in Delhi in the 90s, I was in school in the 90s, and there was almost no boy would ever admit to reading, even like, forget writing. Even the fact that she was reading fiction was considered like, oh, what kind of weird guy is that reading?
Yeah, true.
So, but I continue to read, and I mean, some of my best friends. One of my best friends, until today, I remember once the English teacher forced him to read Agatha Christie novel because he just refused to read, and so she made him read, like, I think Cards on the Table or something like that. And so he finished the book, and he read the whole book because he'd been assigned the book. He read the whole book, and we were on the school bus together. And then he's like, "Okay, I finished the book. So what do I do now?" I was like, aren't you excited? You know the murderer. You know, like, who killed the thing. He's like, "Yeah, I know. So what?" And I actually didn't have an answer to his question. I'm like, "Yeah, that's true." He's like, "These are all made up people, so I don't know. What do I care about?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I don't know how to answer your question. You're right. They're all made up people." I think. But some people love books, some people love literature, and some people don't. And I learned very early on not to judge people for that. Like, it's just an inclination thing. I don't have a deep interest in like, say, artificial intelligence or something like that. But it's fine. Like, maybe those students. I know what you mean. It would be lovely if everyone's read and wrote.
No, I don't even expect it, to be honest. I don't even expect that everyone's going to turn into a writer, because I mean, they just might end up being great doctors or great at anything else. But you never know. Like, sometimes even in those aspects, they just wish that they could just construct a sentence better, and therefore they're less confident when they grow up and talk, right? Because even if you're a doctor and you need to communicate or you need to write an email, you need to be able to do that, right? So I'm worried about that, and how to be able to enable them to just doing at least that well.
I mean, you're totally. It is a problem, and I think a lot of people come to this realization in their 30s or late 20s. Once they've been through their engineering colleges and all that, like, I don't know how to write basic, sentences, and it's making me look bad in my corporate environment, and it's making me look like, like I'm not well educated, or that I'm not. I know this because people tell me. And that I don't have a good education when they do have a great education, So it does cause problems for them, but I wish I had an answer for you. I don't have a solution. The only thing is make them read. Like, if you can make them read, if you can love reading, they'll love writing. Their writing would improve. That's the only way I learned,
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. We have finally Nandini. Miss Nandini, can you go ahead?
Hi. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Nandini, and I teach diploma program English language and literature. I just wanted to know, see, there are multiple realities, experiences, impacts in everyday life. How do you zero down on particular experiences or inspirations when you decide to create a narration? What are the aspects that make you to zero down only on certain experiences and only on certain realities? Is it the people or the immediate scenarios around you that aid you or aid in guiding your thoughts?
That's a good question. I think what happens is, the moments that really stay with you from your own life, from things you see around you. One of the scenes in my book that people sometimes talk to me about was, it's this Sharani is driving through the city, and
Yes, yeah.
And this is before she loses everything, and she's at a traffic light, and this man is driven mad by the heat, and he starts banging on the car in front of her, and the car that's parked in front of her, and it's because of the heat, he just can't deal with it. And this actually happened to me when I was a kid. I'd moved from Calcutta to Delhi, so I think anyway the heat was like, I couldn't handle the heat in any case, and I was sitting in the car, and I saw this man, like, just driven mad by the heat, banging the 45-degree heat in Delhi at that time, and he's banging on the car, and it just stayed with me. It was a scene that I never forgot. And then when I was writing the book, maybe 20 years later or something, I remembered that. See, I was trying to write about heat. I was trying to write about a city that's just, where the heat is so much that people can't handle it. And I remember that scene. It's just about things that stay with you, things that matter to you. Because if you're able to, if you're able to think about those things, those moments in a real way, honest way, you can use them again. So try and, like, if you read, I don't know if you've read V.S. Naipaul's, A House for Mr. Biswas. It's this wonderful,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's all about his own childhood, about his father.
It's true.
But he's picked up the most like heart-rending moments. He probably, his father probably hated him after he wrote that book, but he wrote it anyway. Because he's
Yeah.
chosen these very beautiful, heartbreaking moments of his father's life, and he's written about them. So
is it always honesty, or is it also the what the world around you is looking for sometimes? Do our honest experiences really matter to the world always?
I really think they do. I mean, maybe I'm hopelessly optimistic, but I really do think they do. I think that people care. People want to feel that connection. That's what fiction does, right? It allows us to connect to other people. It allows us to, you can build. I can read a novelist out of South Africa and really empathize with, the plight of white farmers, which I never thought I would empathize with. But if you read a Quincy novel, you can empathize with white farmers, and that's the power of fiction. That's the power of being able to create that. How he makes that real. How that's the work of great writing. That's what great writers do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prayaag. So Prayaag, we'll quickly now jump to questions in the chat. We just have 10 minutes, so we'll sort of have to do like a rapid fire now.
Sure.
But there's a question from Vani. She says, what inspired you to write Leila when you were into economics?
Actually, I was not into economics. I got a degree in it because I was already on that route. I thought I'd become an investment banker, some nonsense like that. Sorry, not to talk about investment banking, but that's what I thought. Luckily, I realized in my final year that this wasn't for me. And so I had a minor in political science, and I moved into journalism. I actually, somewhere in me, I always wanted to write, but I wasn't admitted to myself for a long time. That's a big problem for writers, is that you just think that you're not good enough. You read all these great writers, and you think, I can't write like them, so might as well not try. But that was my experience.
Thank you. Yeah. So we have Arushi Basu. Arushi says, I hadn't submitted a question while registering, but I guess I had, she didn't submit that. How do you define a strong plot? Very often I found myself abandoning plots midway. What would be the best way to push through a good plot?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, so she says that she abandons plots very often. She's like, how do you know that something is a good plot, and how do you pursue that to the end?
That's a good question. That's practice, Again, before I wrote, and actually even practice doesn't really help because, after my first novel, I was writing my second novel. I must have had 2 or 3 false starts in the second novel. I keep thinking that I've started, and then I realize that no, I have to abandon it. So it's not easy. It's a very difficult thing. How do you understand what is good, what is bad? You have to it's practice. You have to keep working, and then hopefully you get one thing works. So many writers spend a lifetime writing and then produce like 4 or 5, 6 books in their life. So it's not easy work. I'm telling you. But it's wonderful work. It's the most beautiful job I could ever have wanted, but it's not easy.
Thank you. So there's Saksham who asks, he's from Step by Step School, asks, please describe your daily writing routine, Mr. Akbar.
That's, it's a very important question, actually. I wake up about 6 or 6:30. I start writing almost immediately. I don't eat breakfast or anything. And then I write till about 1 or 2, and I'll try and do some yoga or something like that. And then I also have a very young son, so he likes to come barging into my room and bangs on the door and all of that. So he's a bit of a distraction. He's about 2 years old, so he's so yeah. You just I try and give myself at least 8 hours a day of at my desk writing every day. Depends on when I can get it. Sometimes it's the evening, sometimes it's the morning, but usually it's first thing in the morning. I'll try and write for 8 hours.
So there's Aditi Rajesh. Aditi asks, you've consistently emphasized on importance of reading. That said, what are some of the books you'd recommend for them to read?
Oh, I mean, that's the endless list. I don't know what kind of books you want to write, what you want to read. There's a wonderful book I enjoyed when I was probably around your age. Called English August by a writer called Upamanya Chatterjee. I recommend. There's all sorts of books. You should read. You should read Naipaul. You should read Hemingway. You should read J.M. Coetzee. These are great writers. Jerry Pinto has written. Was this person from Bombay? The questioner? Yeah. Jerry Pinto has written like maybe the most beautiful Bombay novel I've read in a long time. It's called M in the Big Room. It's a wonderful book about growing up in Bombay with a mother who's mentally unstable. Very wonderful book. Jerry's book is really good. There's all sorts of things. That's a great thing about reading, especially at your age. You can literally walk into a bookstore and encounter just beautiful, brilliant writers everywhere. And I find I was reading an article just the other day about great Japanese writers, and I realized I hadn't read a single one of them. So people who won the Nobel Prize and people who won all sorts of prizes, and I had never heard of them. So there's always more to read. That's the great thing about writing.
And we promised to bring you Prayaag's reading list. Maybe we'll put it on the social media and put 50 books, 50 favorite books of Prayaag.
Of course, I'd do that. Yeah, maybe not 50, but I'll do a list for sure. I'd love that. Yeah, I like to think because it's a great exercise for me to think about too.
So there's Kalyani Sharma. She asks, how do you write from someone else's point of view, who may be of opposite gender or years older to you, like you mentioned? Do you picture someone else when you're writing from their point of view?
Well, it's a good question. I actually used, it's kind of research almost. So I used when I was writing about motherhood, and especially motherhood with a young child. I spoke a lot to my sister. She has 2 young boys. At that time, she already had her older son. So I could speak to her. I would ask her also, she lives in Korea. I would call her up and be like, please tell me, like, when you feed, when you feed a baby, how do you, like, where do you put the bottle? How do you hold the baby? All sorts of questions, because you need to know these details, which I just had no experience of. I used to speak to my mother about, what it's like raising a daughter. You try and understand. You talk to people. I would talk to all my friends with children. Talk to my friends, talk to people, talk to girls I know with daughters, and just get little snippets of experience, of their own experience. Because when you're writing about a life, I would talk to this friend of mine. She's probably never. She doesn't read. She's not a reader, but she was able to tell me so much about motherhood. She lived that experience, and it's so useful to me when I was writing. I would go and sit at her house in her living room and watch her interact with her daughter. See her play with her daughter, see her daughter come and her daughter have her friends over, and I would sit in their living room and just watch them, and then I would go back home and write. It's basically what you do. You have to try and find whatever you can. You understand this is also research. Research is not always sitting in a library and going through anthropology. It's also talking to people and getting to know others.
Thank you. I think we have too many questions, but we'll take the last 2, Prayaag, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
So there is Sapna Mittal from the Heritage School, Calcutta. So she writes saying, how did you feel when your story was adapted by Netflix? And how satisfied were you by the way it was projected?
How did I feel when? Well, it was very exciting, of course. When Netflix wanted my book, it was actually Netflix, the US company. There was no Netflix India at the time. The US company came in and they read my book somehow and they wanted to buy it. And it was like the most. I never expected anything like this, because there was no Netflix at that time. I remember my wife would tell me, "Oh, are you?" She would ask me if do you think Bollywood would want to make this? And it seemed absurd to me because I was like, "Ooh, Karan Johar is not going to make like a dystopic. He's not going to write like a. He's not going to tell a horribly sad story about a woman losing her daughter." And she and then it just turned out that Netflix wanted it. They were looking at for something like this. So of course it was very exciting. That yeah, it was very exciting moment. And then you see, what happens is in these adaptations, what happens is a different team of writers comes on. TV writers. In some senses, as a writer, you have to let go of your story. You have to be able to say, okay, now this is not my story, this is their story. And because when I was watching it on screen, I saw a completely different thing. I didn't recognize many characters and things like that. So it did come as a big shock to me when I saw it for the first time. But you have to. Now I understand that it's part of the process, just letting go.
And do we hear a season 2 of the show? Is there something like that coming up?
This is not the forum for me.
My question.
This is not. I can't be doing breaking news announcements.
Okay, great.
No idea.
Take a last question from Kanan Sehgal. So Kanan writes, so this is a tip, I think it's going to be useful for everyone. He says, I write small articles or blog stuff. I don't know, should I share it with the world, like they're good enough or no? But I want to know about the platforms which can be good deal to share. Also, I've just started writing 3-4 months back.
Platforms that are good to share. You mean like, well, you can now, you can share your work on Twitter. I see very short stories on Twitter, that kind of stuff. But it all depends on what format you're writing. If you're writing short stories, there's different places to publish. There's different places to publish. If you're writing a novel, there's different places to publish. I think don't worry so much about the publishing part. Worry about, if you've just been doing it for 3-4 months, worry about finding your own voice, finding something true that you want to tell, a story that you want to tell, finding the best way to tell it. And of course, don't be afraid to publish, because actually it is a big worry. I had a big problem publishing. I would not publish my fiction for many years. I just wouldn't do it. The book. But now I wonder if I'd had the courage when I was 25 to publish whatever short stories I was writing, if it would have made me a better writer. Because even because you want everyone to say, oh my God, this guy's amazing writer or whatever. But actually, everyone is allowed to develop. It's good for you, for your own education as a writer, to get feedback, to be told, okay, this works and this doesn't work. So whether you do it in a classroom environment or whether you do it, out in public, in the real world, that's up to you. But it's not a bad thing to publish, to want to publish.
Great. Thank you so much, Prayaag. I think we still have a lot of questions, but we'll have to end here. But thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all.
We'll bring you back. We'll bring you
Thanks
back
all.
with your permission. Steal some more time of you. Yes.
Of course, I'd be more than happy. And thank you everyone for logging in. It was really a pleasure. I'm sorry I can't answer all the questions. If Vikram has a record of them, I can try and answer, but I'll leave that to Vikram.
Yes, we'll send you a record.
Yeah.
But also thank you to all of you who logged in. There were more than 350 people. We still have about 200 people online. Thank you, Amartya. Thank you, Ananya, for helping us. We continue to bring these webinars to you. The next one is by Professor Swarna Malya. That's also going to be even more promising. That's a story of politics, history, sustainability, and art. So thank you so much. And Prayaag, some departing thoughts.
No, don't put me on the spot like that. I would just say, again, thank you very much, all of you, for coming in. This was really a pleasure to talk to so many of you and have this experience. I hope it's great to see so much interest in writing. Really, I mean, I think that for me is really gratifying. It makes me happy. Just to see so many people interested in writing, interested in reading. Please keep writing. India needs. We need more voices. We need more independent voices. We need, we need more people to tell stories. So thank you all, and bye. And stay safe. Stay inside. Lockdown. All that. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.